Welcome back to another Wednesday live training talking about work-life balance. Probably the number one thing I hear from husbands and dads that want to upgrade their marriage is, Joel, I just don't have enough time in the day. I'm either a busy first responder or I'm just an entrepreneur or somebody that's out there trying, a go-getter, trying to, like me, trying to get things done. I got a lot of dreams, a lot of passions and things I want to do. And so how do I balance it all? This is part 3 of a 6-part series that I'm doing on work-life balance. And today we're going to talk about multitasking and why I think multitasking is actually a lie and it's crippling you. And it's distracting you again from what's important. Now, the last 2 sessions, we already talked about going into the extremes, using this counterbalance to help you find that rhythm and balance of work-life balance. And then our second issue, our second series, we were talking about how do we measure things? How do we stop creating to-do lists and start making success lists? How do we get very granular on what really matters and what's going to give us the biggest results? So if you haven't watched those 2, go check those other 2 out. And then also, just for those of you that don't know me, before we even jump into this video on multitasking, what I'm going to talk about, what the research actually shows and the top 6 traits that we see of a multitasker that actually causes them probably to fail. And then I'm going to leave you with 3 big ideas and some things, action steps that you can go do right now and start implementing in your family to create that more holistic environment that you guys all want. Now, before we jump in, if you don't know me, my name is Joel Evan. I'm a best-selling author, former police officer of 15 years, and I'm also the founder of First Responder Fathers. I'm really dedicated to helping men build unshakable marriages and deeper connection with their kids because I have a pain to purpose story where I was unconscious literally in my marriage for over a decade. And it wasn't the last 2 years that I invested in myself and I went all in on coaching, parenting, and really my wife made me an ultimatum. She's like, Joel, you need to get your stuff together. And if you don't, like, I'm out. And I could tell she was serious. And so I really made it that moment was the turning point for me. And when I came out of that experience, what I learned was that marriage is a skill, fatherhood is a skill, and I wasn't equipped with those skills. I came into marriage, I came into fatherhood, I was just winging it. And I thought to myself, man, what other career, what other thing that you do in life that you don't train for to get better? Like if you're playing a sport, you train for it. If you go to the gym to get bigger muscles, you train for it. If you want to be healthier and eat better, you learn and you apply it, right? Or some people have mentors. But I feel like marriage and fatherhood is just like an area where we go, well, I'll see what happens. And usually doesn't work because we bring in all of our old stories from our old marriage. And then, like me, for example, being a police officer, I just really amplified probably maybe some of my tactics for like coping. And it just they do well in the battlefield. They don't do too well when you're at your home. Right. So that's my story. And I know having gone through it that if men only have these skills, which is what I want to provide in these trainings, is they can be the leader that their family desires. If you guys need more help, then come join our community. I have a free community. I have a paid community. If you want to be part of men that are working towards this, because I think community is everything. And when you have a community that can challenge you and support you and give you feedback along the way, it's even better. So if you want to join our community, let me know. Just drop me a line here and reach out in the comments and I'll get you the details. Let's jump into it, guys. Multitasking. Should we be doing this, right? And I think it's really strange because really over time, we've created this idea, this paradigm, this image of the modern man that has become a multitasker, right? We're just doing this all the time. And here's the problem. Just because we think we can doesn't mean we should, right? I mean, we've got kids studying, texting, they're listening to music, they're texting, they're watching TV all at the same time, right? Same thing with adults, and I'm guilty of this, right? Driving while I'm talking, looking at my phone for something. My wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm reading Twitter. We're in traffic. What's the big deal, right? Wives too, by the way, eating and applying, they're eating or they're putting on makeup and guys are shaving on their way to work, right? All these things. And just because you're doing something in the room and you're talking to someone, for example, is that a good thing? Does that, just because you can, again, does that make it right? And I could just think of just how many people too, right? You got these really health conscious people, but they're in the bathroom pooping with their cell phone. I mean, I don't know how healthy that can be, but these are the same people that are, wearing masks in 2024. So I don't know. But it's an interesting idea. So anyways, it's not, I think what we need to come back to though, it's not that we have too little time, right? It's not that we have too little time to do all the things that we need to. It's just that we feel the need to do too many things in the same time that we have. And right now, there's a good book called Dopamine Nation, really talking about this idea of this dopamine baseline that we've reached. And because we've reached such a high dopamine baseline, and by the way, dopamine is motivation. It's that get up and go neurotransmitter that our brain makes. And you know what's the biggest dopamine maker of all right now is the cell phone. Because right now at any instant I can pick up my phone and be on TikTok and get a dopamine hit because I'm being entertained or I'm laughing or I'm learning something. And it kind of makes a regular conversation with somebody else kind of boring. And so immediately we're like, man, what if I'm missing out? And we go back to our phones again, right? Here's the problem though, because that dopamine baseline's so high, we need more TikTok to just reach that normal level of like, I feel happy, right? Because if we don't, then we're feeling unhappy. So we need to be hitting a certain threshold now. And I think that's the biggest problem. And so we're tripling up on this hope of getting everything done. And so what do? I did this for many years and it just didn't work. We do task switching. And so it always takes some part of our time, right, where to get back into a new task. So if I'm doing a podcast and then I get on a phone call and then I do a podcast again and then I get on a phone call or a coaching call or then I'm shooting videos, all this task switching, it takes time for your brain to switch directions, to switch channels. And there's a price that you're paying for this. Dr. David Meyer actually says that it can range from a time increase of 25% if it's just a simple task. But if it's something much larger, we're looking at even up to 100% more for some of the complicated tasks. So it's taking our brain more time, more energy to expend to task switch. So here's 6 facts that we're going to see right now from the research that is being done on task switching and for the brain. So here's what it says. And so it has to divide that energy up. But at the end of the day, there's really only enough resources for one task at a time. So just do the one thing that's most important, right? Secondly, the more time that you spend switching to another task, the less likely you are to get back to your original task. And this is how all these loose ends pile up. I'm so guilty of this one, and I would see it happen all the time. I would have these long to-do lists, and I'd get like a half done on each task. And then at the end of the day, I'd look at my task and say, well, what did I do? And I never did anything because only half of every task got done. And it made me feel like I wasn't accomplishing anything, which is the worst. Your brain wants to get these little small wins, so then it keeps showing up and gets, guess what? The dopamine hit to show up and do it again, to be motivated the next day. So number 3, bouncing between one activity and another, you lose time again as the brain reorients to this new task. Now you're thinking, big deal. It might just be a couple of milliseconds, even though we looked at some of the research from Dr. David Meyer. Researchers estimate we lose 28% on an average workday by doing this multitasking ineffectiveness. Up to 28%. So those milliseconds are adding up, right? The 4th big idea is chronic multitaskers. Guess what? They have a distorted sense of how long things actually take. And so they almost always believe that the task will take longer to complete than it's actually required. I'm actually the opposite. I believe it won't take that long, so I cram everything into my schedule. The problem again is chronic multitasking leads you to this belief that you can do that, and you can't. All right, number 5, they make more mistakes, okay? And so what happens with multitaskers is we often see that they're making poor decisions because guess what? They're favoring more of that new information maybe over the old. And even if the older information is more available, right? Because they're switching back and forth. And so now whatever this new information I got, it must be gold, right? And again, I think it has a lot to do with just the switching back and forth, back and forth. Your brain just can't focus and have the bandwidth to do it all. And that's why I've gravitated to a lot of block scheduling, which I've talked about before on the podcast and on these trainings. And the last one, number 6, is they experience more stress and reduced happiness. And that's, again, from that lack of feeling that you're ever accomplishing anything. So I want to wrap this up. I'm going to give you 3 big ideas that you can start taking into your life to create that more work-life balance. Number 1, distraction is natural, okay? Don't feel bad if you get distracted. End of the day, everybody does. And so we make something of it. And that's when we were like, oh, I need a task switch. Oh, I need that dopamine hit. It's okay. And I was talking to this with Matt Bodrow from Apogee Strong. And you know, him and Tim Kennedy are building amazing, really teaching us how do we raise and teach and school young boys and raise some young, amazing men. And he was talking about this idea right here. Good. If your kids are bored, good. It's okay to be bored. Now go do something. And it reminds me of this. I think, you know, because we're always so used to trying to get those dopamine hits and we have such easy access to them, immediately we make something wrong about being distracted. Stop it. Number 2, multitasking takes a toll. We already know that it's going to lead to reduced time, 28%, and then just the amount of energy it's taking from the brain, right? It also leads obviously then to poor choices because you're using up a lot of resources. There's more mistakes, a lot of unnecessary stress, and that is seen, I think, also just from the lack of achievement from things because you're switching so much back and forth. And then the last big thing is, you know, distraction undermines results. And so if you do too much, guess what? You end up doing nothing well. So go out there, figure out what matters most in that moment, and just give it your undivided attention. Presence is the key. And again, most guys are telling me they're not present because they're distracted. Well, this is the reason, because you're trying to multitask and fit so many things into your day that you overextend yourself and then you get nothing done. And then you're left feeling frustrated and aggravated. And so when your kids come in and ask you to play or do whatever, you just feel like you can't because your mind is somewhere else, right? So I hope these things were helpful for you. And if not, tune into the last 2 sessions that we did on the work-life balance series. If you guys need help, you want to learn more about the first responder community and just some of the stuff I'm doing in the fatherhood and dad space, let me know, and husband space, let me know, reach out to me, drop me a line, and I will get you the details. Thanks so much, guys. See you next week.